I have to back up. Big head.
That's probably the first thing that just got onto the live.
I know.
Uh,
It's awesome.
and we
They
are
all want to hear
live
about my
on
big head.
Facebook. I mean, this is the panel for a journey of epic proportions, so I mean, we'll be good today. We will be good. So I am your moderator,
Probably better than the
Jen.
last panel.
Actually, I've been told that the last panel was the best one ever, and that somehow we need to figure out how to top the hats.
Oh,
So
it was awesome. I will admit that.
yeah. This is panel of epic proportions, and we have got a couple of authors here. There's one author who is running a few minutes late, but they will be hopefully joining us in a few. So just a few housekeeping rules or housekeeping pieces before we get started on introductions and get into this. Feel free to ask questions in the comments. We are using StreamYard. If you are new and somehow haven't linked your StreamYard to your Facebook yet, it's only day 5. Nobody's judging you. Please click the link in the post, and it will automatically, or you'll grant permissions, and it will bring you back, and you can talk and will be a Facebook user. So we will be judging everyone who comes in as a Facebook user. We really won't, but. So please feel free to ask questions, drop them in the chat, say hello, and we will get started on introductions. And I'm going to go start with Troy.
Hi, Troy Osgood. I write Skyrealms Online, Battlegrounds Online, and Jeff the Game Master. All 3 of those ended, and I got a new series coming early 2023 that I'm not telling anybody about yet.
Keep us on our toes then. Joshua?
Yeah, I wrote Game of Gods. I'm putting the last book for that up on my Patreon starting on Friday. I've written the Name Chronicles, Dungeon Aria, and I have a new series coming out with Aethon fairly soon.
Okay. And Kaylin?
Hi, I write the Elementalist series and a Flesh Golem's Tales, and the last book in the Elementalist series comes out in January, and the last book in the Flesh Golem's Tales comes out in June.
Awesome. So we're going to hop right into this question from Kyle. Again, please feel free to ask questions in this chat. We are here for an hour, so we've got plenty of time. What is the trope you enjoy writing the most? I'm going to go with Troy.
It's a good question. I don't really have one. I've kind of hitting a little bit of everything. Skyrealms was just VR, MMO, trapped in the game. Jeff the Game Master was another VR MMO, trapped in the game. Battlegrounds was VR, but still not trapped, and little lit FPS. The new series is going to be apocalyptic lit RPG. I've got a dungeon core idea I'm fleshing out. So I kind of hit a little bit of everything, just as long as it sounds fun and it's entertaining.
Okay. Josh?
Honestly, chips have never really made a whole lot of sense to me. I've never been able to keep track of them. The only thing I really try to include in my stories is making sure that the relationships make sense and are realistic. But since the characters drive the stories for me, it's not really me that's including things. So.
Okay. And Kaylin?
I can't say I use a lot of tropes. My books are all second worlds. There's like no VR involved. They are like consistently fast paced, I guess, if that's a trope.
Okay. So I'm going to go with with just another question. It's going to be, how do you keep the momentum going in the story? So I'm going to go with Kaylin.
So, as I said, my books are all very fast paced, and I feel that having a fast pace definitely keeps the momentum going because it never gets to like a trial, or there's never like a chapter that's unnecessary, or like a paragraph, or just pretty much anything that slows things down or gets bogged down. So, as long as like you have a consistent pace throughout, like it's not a pace that's, oh, it's so fast this chapter, then slow this chapter, definitely having like a consistent pace throughout and having everything mapped out ahead can keep a story going.
Hey, Josh?
I'll go with what he said. It's more about maintaining the pace than keeping it like fast paced for me at least. So I'll use like scene breaks and everything like that instead of going to a fight constantly. I'll just try to maintain the pace throughout the story. Uh, so yeah, I'll use scene breaks and everything like that instead of cutting to a fight constantly.
Okay, and Troy.
Yeah, it's a lot of pacing. Even it's got to have momentum at all times. Even the slow parts, where it's just characters talking to each other nonstop, still has to have some momentum and some development, so that as a reader, you know that it's going somewhere. It's not just kind of wasted, water cooler talk where you in the office you're hanging out in the water cooler. You're not really doing anything, you're just chatting just to chat. So everything in the books has to have a point to keep the pace going. Nobody wants to hear, oh, well, I saw the gladiator fights last night and they were fun, and I like this one better than that one. Kind of like where we talk about watching different episodes. Nobody really wants to read about that. The whole, we read these for escapism and the adventures. So you got to keep that pace going and that momentum. So everything has to have a point or a reason to it.
Okay, thank you. So I think Kyle's going to be right on top of all of our questions. As I say that, and another one pops up from him. So what is required to drive your story forward? I'm going to start with Josh.
For me, it's usually all about the emotional connection. My characters drive the story forward, so it's whatever drives them. It's not some great end goal of saving the world. Usually, it's their personal goal, whether it's rescuing their parents for the game of gods. For Ilaria, it was rescuing his mom. Actually, saving the parents comes up a lot. I mean, that was kind of a subset one for that particular story. But yeah, it's whatever they want to do that drives the story forward. For like the Nameless Chronicles, it's just keeping themselves busy so they forget about their own emotional trauma that they experienced as they were growing up. Yeah, I mean, that's it. It's just all about them. It's not saving the world. I kind of try to avoid saving the world stories.
Okay. Troy?
Yeah, it's the characters have a reason to do what they're doing. It's like even us in our lives, we have things that are driving our personal stories forward. It's going to work, bettering our lives, making a better lives for our children, that kind of stuff. So we're still in a way driving our stories forward the same as our characters are. So there's got to be something that motivates them to get out the door and go on the adventure, or go rescue the parents, or save the damsel or the guy, or defeat the dragon, save the village, save the world, whatever it is. It's my kid's stealing something out of the kitchen right now, so that's what I was like. She's trying to be sneaky, but not as sneaky as she thinks she is. So
her goal is obviously to steal a
drives
cookie.
them along. She's not very sneaky. She forgets that I did everything that she does.
Yep. Kaylin?
So I write with a lot of different plot lines, and definitely, as both Joshua and Troy said, having characters with a consistent motivation and something they're working towards. And then when you have like 3 or 4 plot lines happening, you've got 3 or 4 different like main character bases in each plot line, and they all have the things they're working towards, and some of them might intersect with others, and some of them might be against each other with their different goals. And just keeping that momentum, keeping the different plot lines together, then bringing them together and apart, and just keeping all the characters working to achieve their goals and let them achieve their goals. Definitely don't give them impossible goals. They all have something they want to achieve and are eventually going to achieve or die trying.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan, for calling out CM Carney that he is running. He is running a little late, but no, he did not lose all of his weight. I couldn't leave that comment alone. So I'm gonna go with a comment from a different Ryan, because Ryan DeBurn is, I feel like, just the peanut gallery for us. So in lit RPG, a lot of times there has to be some grinding to get to certain levels. How do you keep a story exciting while grinding? And I'm gonna go from the top down. So Troy?
just changing it up a bit. Not just I try to make it so it's not straight grinding. Like when I play games, I hate grinding. It drives me crazy. So I want something, a reason to be there for the grinding. So like when I played World of Warcraft, I always liked lining up my crests all up in the same zone, the same area, so that I'm out there going to complete a crest, and along the way, if I kill 30 mobs on my way, well, I'm on my way to a crest. I'm not just sitting there grinding away in the forest and letting them come to me. I have a purpose, so I try to incorporate that so that as the characters going along, yeah, they're killing as they, the random encounters that you used to get in D&D back in the day. So that's the grinding. It's not just sitting there in the same mine chopping away on the same ore for hours at a time, or in the same forest killing rats nonstop. There's quests pushing them forward, and along the way they'll kill whatever they come across to gain that extra experience. But they're not. It's not like grinding when I'm in a game and just sitting there in the same forest nonstop.
That reminds me so much of New World when it first came out. Everyone was just standing there chopping trees. So Kaylin.
So I mainly have my characters fight other characters to gain experience rather than mobs, because as you know is known, it can get kind of boring if you just have a character fighting. Like I stabbed my sword into this one, then twisted it into this one. It can get kind of repetitive. So it's more exciting if it's multiple characters who you kind of care about, and some of them will kill the other ones. So it's more exciting. It's more tense, and since they're different like characters, they've got their own classes and abilities, so it keeps stuff new and interesting. Of course, then I do have like monsters and stuff they fight, but then it's more interesting and refreshing if they're normally fighting characters. Oh, it's a giant magman or a frog-like creature. It's more interesting because you're usually fighting like humans or elves, like humanoids. So it's more interesting when there's like this big, huge, horrific creature that's like eating people's veins and stuff.
Right. And Josh.
My characters don't do a lot of grinding in my stories. I usually only have a few fights in my books, period, and then I will just kind of gloss over a lot of like the rest of the battles, I guess. Typically, if they need to get to a certain level, because that's where I outlined they get an ability, then I'll detail them doing, a lot of battles in the meantime, or, there's a mass fight or something where they would have gotten a lot of experience, and I'll detail that one. Um, but since I don't generally enjoy reading fight after fight after fight, I think it gets really repetitive. I try to do one or two well described fights, and then I gloss over the rest of them, because they typically start to read the same after a while, especially if the character only has a set number of abilities or a weapon. I mean, unless they're getting new things constantly, which is just impossible to keep track of anyways, they start to read the same.
Okay. And I think this question from Kyle relates to what we were just talking about. Do you enjoy the crunch or the story the most? I'm going to go start from the bottom with Kaylin.
So starting out, I actually enjoyed the crunch the most. As with book one, a whole lot of it was different, like statistics, numbers, stat sheets. And then book two, lesser a bit. And then book three and four, I'm writing book four of The Elementalist right now. And I'm finding that the main character's only looked at his stat sheet 3 times in 100,000 words. So not very often. And I found that I'm giving less and less damage notifications because it's more obvious. You know by now how much damage his stuff does. So what kind of wounds he's inflicting. So you can just like describe the injuries he's inflicting or that's being inflicted upon him instead of like describing the damage. So at the beginning, I liked the crunch a lot more, and that was my whole motivation. But now that the story's been going and it's coming to its end, it's definitely a lot more of the story for me and the character stuff rather than like just the grinding.
Okay. Joshua?
I definitely do more light lit RPG, I guess. I don't enjoy writing the crunch, especially when it comes to like writing the damage notifications. That just I write more. I don't do VR stuff, and so you wouldn't really expect to see that in real life, anyways, I guess. Um, but yeah, I'll do one or two stat sheets per book, and that's about it. Uh, because I don't enjoy writing those as much. I was gonna do a full thing on it, and then I kind of lost my train of thought.
No, that I totally get that. So you're good now,
Yeah,
Josh? Yeah.
I
Okay.
wasn't able to really get it, so it's fine.
Yep. And Troy.
As a reader, I kind of like both, as long as the crunch is actually has a point to it, and it's not just there just to throw some nice numbers at it, like what Sean Oswald does in Life in Exile, where his Life in Exile series, where the crunch actually has a point to all the numbers, and it translates into you actually seeing the damage. So all the calculations. I think Defiance of the Fall is another good one that does it. But then I also like the ones where it doesn't get as nitty gritty. You know, it's you still got it because you kind of have to have some crunch to be lit RPG. But I kind of tend to gloss over it a little bit. Like I tried to be a little crunchy with Sky ones, but as it went on, I just kind of glossed over it because I don't like doing math. And I don't want to figure out the damage and well, the armor is this, the damage resistance is this, the attack's this, but the special power does this, but it's got 5% bonus because this condition or this. Yeah, no, I just don't feel like doing that math. So it all exists. Like in my new stuff, it's all there, but I don't get too deep into the details. You just know that there's a little bit of extra bonus because he's got this ability and does a little bit more extra damage, and he doesn't take as much damage because he's got elemental resistance to certain attacks, but I don't get into the actual numbers. So I like both, but I don't want to write both.
Understood. So going over to a question from Nick, does having a strong supporting cast help keep motivation and momentum going in your story? And I'm just going to start right back with you, Troy.
Oh yeah, that's needed. It's definitely needed to have a good, strong cast around a character. Everybody exists with people around us. We don't, even the hermits still have some people that exist in their circle and that keeps them going. So even the MCs need that people to help them, keep them motivated, keep them centered, all that stuff. Give them some reason to get out of the door in the morning.
Okay. Josh?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do by yourself, or if there's like a two-person main character setup. So you always need to have more characters than just the main character to, get them involved in the world, whether it's giving them quests, giving them emotional support, just getting them involved with the community. You can't just be a one-man army. You have to have other people around you. So yeah, having a strong supporting cast definitely keeps the momentum going and the motivation. So absolutely.
And Kaylin?
Definitely 100%. I have like 6 characters around my main character, and they all have their own reasons for allying themselves with him or working like with him, and they all have their own motivations, which keeps everything going. Because if there would ever be like a time where the story could potentially slow, like you've got them with their goals pushing it forward, and having so many characters, I believe is a great thing because if you just have like one character or 2 characters, as was said, it can work for like one book, but then you definitely need multiple characters to have. It just brings up a lot more drama and a lot more excitement with more characters having all their own different goals and stuff.
Okay. And speaking of characters, this question was asked a little bit ago from Kyle. Is having a romantic interest a disadvantage to moving the story forward, or having it to be strengthen the story? So I'm going to go with Troy.
It can be both. It all depends on the situation and the 2 characters involved. I mean, we've all read the books where we have the relationships that we absolutely love and we want to continue, or the ones that we just can't stand. Like, why is this person with so-and-so? And it can end up dragging down the story and detracting from it. Whether there's the ones where you want to, the whole shipping thing where you want these 2 to be together. That's kind of what you get into, is hoping and wishing that these 2 people end up together. So it's all depends on the execution. Sometimes it can be good, sometimes it can be bad. I try to put in a little bit in my books here and there. Like in Battlegrounds, there's none whatsoever, and it just fits the story. It's that type of story. And Jeff, the game master, we kind of hinted at little bit of relationship building throughout the course of the book between two sets of characters, and it kind of comes together at the end where they don't really get together, but they start to try to, it in the two different scenes end with the one guy's knocking on the girl's door and she answers it, and the other one is they kind of like, hey, you want to go grab some coffee? But in Sky Realms, the main character ends up romantically involved with one of the NPCs, and she ends up pregnant at the end. So they start a whole family going on. So it all depends on the situation, the execution, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Kaylin.
It definitely helps keeping the momentum going, because when you have like two characters that really care about each other, and then let's say something happens to one of them, then you can do like some really interesting stuff with the other one. So it really helps with motivation and making characters more complex, because they care about multiple things and they'll react differently to different things happening when they care about another character. So it definitely helps like keeping the story going, and just you can use a lot of fun stuff with characters when, as I said, I love like setting two characters up, then something happens to one of them, then it's some nice motivation.
Yeah. And Joshua.
What was the question again?
It was, of course, a romantic interest a
Okay, yeah.
disadvantage to moving the story forward, or can it strengthen it?
I think it really just depends. I mean, I'm pretty sure Troy already went over it, but yeah, it's entirely subjective to the story. If you do it well, then it's an advantage, because the characters bounce off each other naturally. If you do it badly, or if the character is just a pain, then the reader is going to hate them and it becomes a disadvantage. The book becomes a slog. Or if you're just trying to force it, then I mean, trying to write that character in is just going to be a pain. And then it just becomes another disadvantage. So
Absolutely. Oh, apparently we have spoilers. Well, I think from some of the questions. So going to a question from Franny, when writing, how much would you say you dedicate to lore and such? And I'm gonna go with Kaylin.
That's definitely my favorite part about writing. It's also the part when I started writing that I was definitely the weakest at. But that definitely made it be something that I spent a lot of time trying to get better at, and it's something that now is my favorite part. I add lore by flashing around to like different characters in different like sections of this continent that my story takes place in, and it's a lot of there's a lot of pleasure in having like all these different characters in these different sections of the continent, and then at a certain point you'll have had like perspectives from each of them, so you kind of understand what's happening in each section of the continent and like the history of all these different like cities or kingdoms, and you know what each region's like gone through and what the current goals of like each region and the people in charge are. So I think that lore is very important and a lot of fun to put in.
Right. I'm gonna go with Troy. That way.
you just couldn't remember how to say my name.
Right?
Well, I was just like
Just shaking it
not
up
sure
a bit.
where. Yeah, I just shake it up. So that way, Troy.
Yeah. I love world building. It's fun to just kind of pull all this stuff together, but it's also something you can like lose yourself in and get deep. You'll see all these amateur, or not really amateur authors, but people are trying out. They're like, oh, I developed this world over 10 years. Like, well, okay, how much of that is you are actually going to get into? So you have to kind of straddle the line of building the world so it feels real, has logic to it, it exists. But do you need to give every moment in history, create every moment in history? No, you want to kind of leave parts of it open so as your story develops, you can kind of go in and flesh out a an area over here, or add something that you hadn't even thought about at the time. So you kind of have to build the foundation, the nice solid foundation, then kind of build the walls as you go along, and leaving yourself ability to expand on stuff. But it's a lot of fun to play that game and develop things and make sure it all works, and you don't write yourself into a corner. And then you have to figure out how to get out of it.
Right. And Josh.
It varies from book to book, honestly. I usually try to do it through monsters. The main character, or the characters rather, saying something about the monsters, where they would come from, their environment, or like a specific herb, something like that. That gives the background that the reader wouldn't have known. Maybe something about the item as well, as they introduce it. But if they're going to a new area, I would do it through, another introduction. But outside of that, it's more of it's discovered naturally, I guess. So I wouldn't say I do it super heavily. It's not like 20% of the book is straight lore. So not entirely sure how to put it. It comes naturally, I guess, to the reader.
No, it makes sense. Absolutely. So I am going to there. I feel like there's all the questions from Kyle. Sorry, I just had that. Oh, Brian's in here with a question as well. But I'm gonna go actually with, because I do want to go back to this question from Kyle. Do you think that having a narrator can improve the book, and if so, who is the narrator that you would love to work with that you haven't? You don't necessarily have to call out anyone if you don't want to, but of course he's asking. And I'm gonna start with Josh.
I mean, just because he's like everybody's top pick, I'll go with Travis. I've never worked with the guy. He seems like fun. I've heard him talk before, through some of these panels in the past, and he seems like an awesome guy. But I mean, if I absolutely had to pick a narrator, I'd go with Nathan Fillion. I mean, I know he did some work with
Yes.
Podium, so but yeah, having an awesome narrator can absolutely raise your book to the next level.
Absolutely,
I've
I agree.
I've yeah.
Yeah, that's why I really wanted to ask this question, because I feel like it's a very hot topic on that. And I'm gonna go with Kaylin.
So I'm currently working with Gary Furlong to get my books turned into audiobooks, and I'm just so excited about that because I believe the audiobooks really do enhance the story and bring the characters more so to life because you can like hear their voices and such. So that's huge for me, and I can't wait for those audiobooks to come out next summer, next fall. But my dream narrator has always been Jeff Hayes. I think Jeff Hayes just has the best voice out of everyone. And someday, I'd love to get a book narrated by Jeff Hayes.
Absolutely. Very. And Troy.
Yeah, some books I like to listen to and some I like to read. And some books are just made to have a specific narrator. So I'm like I can't imagine Dungeon Crawler Call with anybody but Jeff Hayes doing that. I mean, that is just the perfect synergy of book and narrator. So like another one that I can't imagine reading. I just have to listen to is it's not a RPG, but it's a fantasy. Was Black Tongue Thief by Christopher Buehlman, I think it's pronounced. And he actually did the narration himself, and it was just absolutely amazing. It's probably the best book I've ever listened to. I can't imagine reading that one, but there's some books that I've read and I can't imagine listening to. But a good narrator can definitely make the book better. But then a bad one can ruin it. Like there's a narrator I'm not going to name, but I just got done listening to one by him, and he's considered very popular by a lot of people, and I just can't. It's kind of, I don't know what it is, but I just kind of get distracted when I'm listening to it. I like the stories there, and I think I'm going to switch over to start reading it for the next volumes. But it just doesn't work for me. But out of all I've worked with some great ones so far, and obviously Travis is up on the list of who I want to work with. Luke Daniels, Ossie Bray. There's a whole bunch of ones. Jeff Hayes. Jeff actually did a little bit in a short story I did for Athon. Did a short story collection for superhero related stuff with Sound Booth, and so I get to have Jeff do one of the characters in the short story I did, which was awesome. And then he had Lauren Winkle did the rest of it, and she was just absolutely amazing. I hadn't heard anything by her, but now I want to just do something female led so I can just get her to read it.
Absolutely, I totally get that. As an audiobook listener, I get it. Like there's just sometimes those people that just don't you just can't get into the story with that voice, and it has nothing to do with the narrator. It just isn't.
It's some weird combination of maybe the story is not made for narration, or who knows? Just could just be me. Probably just me.
I do like how Brian highlighted that he thinks that James Marston's the Spike from Buffy is with Podium, which I think that's kind of funny, just because of how he's answering the question even in the comments. But appreciate you.
That'd be
yeah,
a good
I know.
I think one of my next series coming up is with Podium. So hey, Podium, you're listening,
And Kyle,
hook
please
us up.
I know, right? Exactly. Kyle, don't apologize for the comments questions, because I still want you to keep asking them. So
Kyle always has awesome questions. We're not related, but I wish we were.
He does have great questions. And at one point, like my whole like the question piece was just all Kyle, and I was like, okay, this works. I can do this. I'm gonna go with a question from Ryan. What would you say is your Achilles heel? What brings your momentum down the most when it comes to writing? And I'm gonna start with Kaylin.
As I said, my books are very, very fast paced, and so it's pretty much easy. It's very easy for me to keep the story going. Something that I find a lot of trouble with is keeping track of numbers, like numbers of people in different areas, because there are lots of like armies or forces throughout my books in different sections, and I have to remember like how many priests are over here or how many soldiers are in this group over here and where everyone's going. So that's definitely the hardest part for me. I have lots of different Google Docs just of notes of how many people are with like each section inside. And I'm always afraid like I'm gonna mess up and put like 26 when there's really 24, and then someone's gonna go back and say, "Oh, well, no, 13 came from here and 12 came from here, so you messed up." So like that's my biggest fear, and it hasn't happened yet. So I want to make sure like it never does. And that's just kind of the only thing that's tough for me with writing, is trying to make sure I've got like the numbers right of how many people are here and how many people are over there.
So I almost talked and I was muted. Sounds good. And Josh?
Deciding when to put a scene skip in. I don't like doing scene skips that are overly long. No, that's not it. I don't even know how to describe it. If I just got done with a certain like emotional scene, I like leading into the next one properly. I don't just like ending it on a cliffhanger and then going into the next scene without leading into it properly. And so I have to do it naturally, but sometimes it doesn't come naturally, and a scene skip would just be better. But I don't like doing it. It's a mental block, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so when I have to really dig into that and write it out, it slows me down completely.
Okay. Tori?
I don't have any particular thing. It's just always the middle. I'm a pantser or a discovery writer, or however you want to call it. I don't outline, or I have a general idea of where I want to end up and some specific scenes I want to kind of hit along the way, or some things I want to happen, but the characters kind of just lead it the way. But always, no matter what book it is, always when I get into the middle, it starts slowing down. It's a slog to get through. I don't know why. It doesn't matter what is going on or anything. Just the middle. I need to be able to get through the middle faster.
And here I was going to say it was when your daughter tries to sneak a cookie.
But they're usually asleep when I write, so that's
She
not
rogues
usually an
back?
issue.
Exactly. Hey, so going to a question from Kyle. We all know that books such as Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and Stormlight are considered epic. What can make a story become epic? Is it the character based, the storyline, or relationship based? And I'm going to start with Josh.
Yes, all of those things. Usually, I think most people just consider how the length and what kind of story is being told. Like if it encompasses the entire world, or like if it's a world-ending type of deal. I think that's what most people would generally consider epic, depending on just like the stakes. Um, but for a lot of these things, it's the length. I mean, none of those stories are exactly short. I mean, outside of Lord of the Rings by our modern standards. But yeah, definitely the stakes, the relationship, all of those things I would consider epic in their own way.
All right. Kaylin?
I would definitely classify an epic story as a story with like all-encompassing plot lines, like characters, a story where you get like a scope of the place, a scope of the world. For me, it's a scope of this continent. So in my books, there's a continent called Valorant on a planet called Everworld, and you don't just have like one character in like Wildero in Valorant doing his thing. You've got one character there, and then you've got characters up in Stormhold, and characters in the north, and characters down in the dungeon city of Darton, and characters in the south, and characters over on the Pirate Island place. And just you've got characters and plot lines in all kinds of different places. So you get like this epic scope because you can understand, hey, this happening here, and how is this happening down here going to affect what's going on up here? If these elves want to keep this territory, how is that going to affect this person over here building this fort because he needs wood? And if people from Stormhold don't cut down moonwood, they're not going to have lumber. So for me, it's like a story that encompasses a whole lot of stuff and just feels very big, not exactly big scale like world ending, but big scale as in there's a lot happening and you have a good grasp of everything that's happening and how something somewhere happening will affect everything else.
Okay. And Troy?
Yeah, epic for me is definitely storyline related. Like all the character stuff, all the romance stuff that can happen, and non-epic stuff as well, and helps drive those things forward. But epic is epic. It has to be big. It has to be have high stakes. So world saving kind of stuff. Saving the town, yeah, that's great. But I don't really consider that epic because it's localized to just the one area. Epic's got to be something like if you mess up, everybody's going to suffer instead of just a small percentage. Like Game of Thrones, I wouldn't necessarily call epic if you take out the White Walkers, or I forget what they call it. It's been so long now.
I think so.
But if you take out the zombies, it's all just little kingdom stuff. It's not the world itself is going to keep going on. When the kingdom changes. That's not necessarily epic. Lord of the Rings, if someone gets the ring, then the entire world's going to end. Like Dresden Files started off as non-epic, with each book kind of being a specific case, but now it's expanding. So Harry's got to stop all. I think it's the other. I think they call it from just coming on and destroying the world. So it can even change along the way as the story starts off non-epic and then becomes epic as it goes as the stakes get bigger.
Okay. So a question from Brian is, how do you all balance your pacing when going for epic length stories that span over a long period of time? Do you try to pack in early action beats to keep people invested for later payoffs, or do you have your own tricks? And I'm going to start with you, Troy.
The characters. You gotta create characters that people want to learn about their lives, because that's really what we're doing is we're telling the story, the lives of these people. And if it's a boring character, it doesn't really matter what they're doing. You're just going to lose interest because you got to get invested in the character, not invested in the stakes. What's going on? Because you want the character to deal with the stakes. If you don't like the character, then who cares? Let the world be destroyed. So it's really you got to make an engaging character, make their lives engaging and interesting, and just keep the reader wanting to learn what happens to the character. When the book ends, you want the reader to go, no, what happens? Do they live happily ever after, or what happens next? So you want the reader to be invested in the characters.
Yeah, I feel like our chat's getting a little away from us. There's some jokes from the previous takeover now coming through, but I'm gonna go with Kaylin.
What was the question?
It was Brian's question. How do you all balance your pacing? Yeah, we don't leave Brian's comments on the screen because it covers up everyone's faces.
So some books at the beginning, and these books are obviously fine, and I've listened and read to so many of them. Some books hit you with a lot of information at the beginning, where it's necessary for the rest of the story, but it is like, oh, I have to listen to 5 hours of this book, or on Audible, or read like 10 chapters just to get to like the interesting stuff. And it is important later on, but it's kind of, I have to get through this. And some books start out slow and it's like, oh, I have to get through this, but it's going to get good. So that's why I get through it. I don't believe that's how That's not how I personally write my books. I believe every single chapter should be very engaging and very interesting. So I try and keep a fast pace and just keep every single chapter. There needs to be fun characters, interesting characters doing like just interesting stuff, like completely insane, bizarre stuff that you wouldn't normally see in your average like story. So very fast paced, keeping everything interesting. I try and rather than I don't like do big information dumps on people. I have my characters gradually like learn stuff as they go. So you learn like as the characters do, which isn't all at once. It's like throughout a series of like 4 books. By the end of the 4th book, you'll be like, okay, I've got everything I understood and I learned it as the characters did. So definitely very fast paced and just don't write anything that you wouldn't enjoy reading yourself.
Okay. And Josh.
I think I'll go with mostly what Troy said. I mean, it's all about the characters. If the reader enjoys the characters, they'll stick around regardless of the pacing for the most part. But he made an excellent example with the Dresden Files. They started out as more like episodic books with the mystery of the book, and then they moved on to the epicness. I mean, they were still good books regardless, but they had their dry moments, and then they became like really awesome towards the latter half of the series. And but you stuck around because Dresden was awesome. He had the interesting moments with the other characters. So that's really what I try to do. I mean, my pacing is my pacing. The only thing I can do is make my characters as interesting and as real life as I possibly can. It's their story. It's not mine.
Absolutely. And I really like this question from Ryan DeBurn. Where do you feel you are on your own epic journey of being an author? And I'm going to start with Josh.
Hmm. Uh 5 steps in. I have a lot of books I still want to write. But I mean, I'm not exactly at the beginning. Uh, but I'm nowhere near the end. I have some fairly big ideas I would like to get down, and books series I want to come across. But I mean, I've just finished the 5th book, the final book in Game of Gods, and that was a big one for me. Um, but yeah, I mean, if we're talking about the epic journey of my writing, then yeah. If we're talking about life, then my life's not epic at all. So that's not even worth discussing. But yeah, I don't know, maybe like 5 steps in.
Hey, Kaylin.
I'm at the very, very beginning. I'm just at the bottom of that hill, and I'm hoping to make it to the top someday.
Okay. And Troy?
There's kind of like 2 parts to that. There's like the creative part and the business part. Like I first published my first book actually back in 2016, and it did absolutely nothing. It was I had no idea what I was doing, and then I discovered Lit RPG around that time as I was writing the sequel to that, which I actually ended up unpublishing because I just did not like it. And then I wrote Skyworms Online, the first book, and hooked up with Aethon to publish it, and that kind of just changed everything at that point. And it's like, oh, I can actually maybe do this for the business side. The creative side was always going to be there, but you kind of want some return of the effort you put into these. We write for ourselves and we write because we have stories to tell, but you still kind of want to get a little bit back for all the investment of the time we put into it. So that's always nice to see. So on the creative side, I'm getting going and getting, I got a couple series under me and moving forward. And I got a ton that I still want to get into, some other stuff. I have 2 daughters, and I'm like, need to write something for them. I want something that they can read of mine and grow up with. So I'm going to have some middle grade stuff. Going to be working on some stuff that I actually some stuff that they've written that I'm adapting. Got a Pokemon style thing I'm going to try to get into. So there's always something going on. The business side is when you can actually start selling books and realizing that people actually like what you're doing, which is awesome. It's the greatest feeling in the world. So that kind of adds another thing to it where eventually I wanted this to be my main job. It's not there yet, so that's the kind of the goal I'm working towards, is the day when I can tell my boss, see ya, and start doing this full time. And then I can even put out even more stories at that point. So creatively, I'm getting to where I want to be, getting better, getting to be a better writer, putting more stories out there. And on the business side, not where I want to be yet, but I'm got the plan to get there. So.
Okay. I feel like Ryan just half-assed that just because this is epic proportions, and he just wanted to get that in there. So I'm going to go with the question from Kristen. If you could write in any fantasy world, which would you choose? And I'm going to start with Kaylin.
That's a difficult question that if I had the magic like option to, I would need like a week to consider it and make the right choice. Just off the bat, I'd say He Who Fights with Monsters would be a pretty awesome fantasy world to write in. I have a lot of ideas with different types of things you could do in that world, and that would be a lot of fun.
Okay. Troy?
I'd have to say probably the Forgotten Realms, which is was one of the D&D settings and is now the default setting for Dungeons and Dragons, only because series was a huge influence on me as I was developing as a writer and as a teenager into young adulthood and stuff. So that setting was just such a huge influence on me in that world. I never really got to play Dungeons and Dragons in it, but I still had all the source books and everything. So that was like my first real introduction to a huge world, interconnected world. So that one's had a lot of influence. I just had a second one. I just can't remember what it was now. So you can move on.
Kind of like how earlier with Josh. So it happens to the best of us.
Oh, because I was just staring at my shirt. So I've always had a dream of writing for Marvel Comics and doing comics. So that would be the other one I would like to play in someday, is the Marvel Comics universe.
That would be fun.
Absolutely. And Josh?
Mistborn by Sanderson.
Hey.
I think playing around with Allomancy, especially his later series with like Alloy of Law, that would just be fun. I mean, I don't know. There was something always about those books that just got to me. I think it would be really fun to play around in that universe.
Okay.
So yeah, definitely those ones.
And
You're welcome.
I'm gonna
I love
go.
seeing comments like that. Those always make my day.
And I will tell you that we definitely have a lot more questions than we have time left. We have a little under 15, about 10 minutes left, and I'm going to try to get through as many questions as I can. But if we do not get to your question, feel free to drop it into the Discord, and the panelists will be there. The authors, will be there to chat and answer all of your questions. Like I said, we only get an hour to chat, and it's definitely not as long as any of us seem it as it is. So I'm going to go with a question from Sharon. Is power creep a problem for you, and how do you handle it? And I'm going to start with Troy.
That's always going to be an issue, because the characters advance in power and get stronger. Games, it's easy because everything is zoned. So as you get stronger, you go to a stronger zone, so it levels out. And depending on how you set up your worlds, you're not going to have that issue. So power creep is definitely an issue, and how I handle it just varies by book. But it is something we deal with on a regular basis.
Okay. Joshua?
Yeah, it's definitely a problem, and one I've become very cognizant of with my later books. With Game of Gods, I made Charles way too powerful, way too quickly. By the end of book 4, he is a literal god. He's pretty much able to smack down anything with impunity. And so that made writing book 5 a pain because there are no more challengers for him at that point. But I had to figure out a way to make the book interesting, and so that was part of the reason why it took me so long to write book 5 in that series. Because I mean, I always knew how the series was going to end. It was just a matter of whether it was going to be 6 books or 5. But yeah, so yeah, power creep is definitely a problem, and because of my experience with Game of Gods, it's become such an issue in my mind that as I give my characters their levels, their abilities, their items, that I keep more in mind of how they are going to affect their future battles. And that's really what it is at this point, is just keeping in mind how it's going to affect everything in the future. With Game of Gods, it was more of I want him to be OP, and I made him a little too OP.
Hey, Kaylin.
So with the Elementalist books, that's not really a problem for me because it's just I'm reading the last book now, and it's just going to be a 4-book series. And the characters start out, at the bottom, and they're working their way to the point. I don't want to give spoilers to the point they'll get to, when the book ends. And it's definitely not. I could, if the series was going to go for like 10 books, I feel like it would be a problem. But with 4 books, I don't think it is. With a Flesh Golem Tale of Resurgence and a Flesh Golem Tale of Redemption, it's it's not really a problem either, not at least for the main character. I have encountered, like, the side characters in that book are very strong in comparison to the characters in the Elementalist. So I have found some issues trying to keep track of them and just make sure they don't get too strong, because the main character is definitely in those books the weakest character, because he died and came back as a flesh golem, so he lost like everything. But the other characters around him are a lot stronger, and it is something to keep track of them, but I don't consider it a problem.
Okay. And got a question from Franny. If you had only one book to call the most successful epic journey, what would it be, and why does it work so well? This is a very loaded question.
Ooh, yeah, it is.
Yeah, I'm going to start with Kaylin.
So there are books I really enjoy, like books I'm reading now and books that have come out in the last 5 years. Like, I love He Who Fights with Monsters. I love, I wouldn't call Dungeon Crawler Carl an epic story, but it's a story that I love. I would classify He Who Fights with Monsters as an epic adventure, but there are so many books coming out now that I love. I'd say are you saying, I think it's the most successful in general? Because I believe to the world that would definitely be Lord of the Rings or Wheel of Time, where I'm definitely more interested. I've read the Lord of the Rings book. I have not read Wheel of Time, but I'd say that those two series seem to be the things they've made like the most impact on the world. And it was definitely very I'd have to say it's the Lord of the Rings, those 3 books. I couldn't. It is just one book, but I couldn't choose one book. It's all of those 3 books together, and it's a testament to how much I love that series. That when Rings of Power came out, I cried because of how bad it was. But yeah, I'd say the Lord of the Rings books.
Troy?
Yeah, I was Lord of the Wings is going to be my answer too. That's the single most successful. It is what it is. Basically the definition of an epic in my mind. It's not even my favorite series. It's that I might squeeze into the top 10, maybe. I read it a lot of times. I don't. It's good, but it's not my favorite. But it is probably the most successful epic epic journey, and it's the definition of an epic journey in my mind. Going back to what Caitlin said about He Who Fights with Monsters, I think will end up being one of those classics when it's all said and done. It's got everything that makes it, and that's probably one of my favorite series right now. But of all time, it's right now it's Lord of the Rings.
Okay. And Josh?
I have two. I have two answers. One, hopefully, I won't get like struck by lightning in the Bible, just because I mean that's
Mm-hmm.
literally an epic journey. But I mean a little less tongue in cheek. Barsoom. Edgar Rice Burroughs is quite literally one of the original hero journey epics. Almost all novels we have nowadays are based off of it in some form or another. You can look it up that like Star Wars and most other sci-fi novels are based, or movies rather, are based off of the way it was set up. I mean, the Jedi are based off of the Jediacs, and they stole the name and everything. But yeah, so I would go with Barsoom because while it's not quite as well known, it did set up the format that we use.
Okay. So just final piece is that we do have the Discord. If we didn't get to your question, please go over and ask in the Discord, and feel free to chat and talk about more about all of this. We had really great questions come through. We even had more questions that we didn't get to. And we're going to do our final wrap up and have everyone go back through, introduce themselves, their series, and anything else that they would like to add to their closing comments, so that we will be done by the top of the hour. And I'm going to start with Troy.
Try again. Skyrealms Online, Jeff the Game Master, Battlegrounds Online. They're all finished. The third book for Battlegrounds will be out before the end of the year. The new stuff starts early 2023. I do have a series on the new recently announced Yonder app, storytelling platform, put out by Webtoons, and that's called Tales of a Far Rider. And it's not lit RPG, it's straight progression fantasy. So yeah. And I have a kid sneaking into the office.
There you go. All right, Kaylin.
So I've got the first 3 books in my Elementalist series out right now. I'm working on book 4, which will be the grand conclusion, if you will, which is coming out in January. Hopefully, it could be anywhere from December to February, but hopefully I'm thinking early January. I also published a book in June called A Flesh Golem's Tale of Resurgence. The sequel to that is A Flesh Golem's Tale of Redemption, which is coming out, I'm thinking, early summer, late spring next year. And I'm also working on a book which I've wanted to write for a long time, but just haven't. I wanted to finish up the Elementalist first. It's going to be called The Villain Chef, and it's going to be about this chef who's a personal chef for this villain. And it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be definitely not an epic story, more of a lighthearted story. But yeah.
All right, and Josh, you've got the final, so you're gonna Geneva will cut you off if you go over.
Yeah, she will. Okay, well, I mean, I have all of my books: Game of Gods, The Ridden, and Portals of Change. I also have my my Patreon. I upload pretty much every day on that one new chapters for a few different books you can check out. Lots of different things coming out next year, hopefully. I did that quick, so you don't have to cut me off.
No, you're good. Now
I'm doing lots of different things and stories. Putting up new chapters for Game of Gods. That was the big one I really wanted to finish off. But I'm trying out new genres, new things, just new ideas. So
awesome. And thank you guys for joining us again today. We really appreciate you taking your time and answering these questions. Again, if you wanted to ask any questions in the Discord, feel free to do so. Also on the the website, litcon.net, there is information about all of the authors, and they will redirect to their Amazon pages. So you can definitely go and check out all of their books. If you didn't remember their titles, you remember their author name, please go and check them out. We totally appreciate you supporting these authors in any way, shape, or form. So again, thank you for joining us, and we truly appreciate you taking the time today. Not only just you, all of the people who came by, stopped to say hi in this panel and ask questions. We really appreciate them. Random troll check. Thank you, Jay. So appreciate you, and have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
thanks, everyone.